This man is a monster. Oh, look at that. Oh,
In the history of heavyweight MMA, few fighters were as terrifying, relentless, and dominant as Cain Velasquez. At his peak, he wasn't just winning fights, he was breaking opponents mentally and physically. His pressure was nonstop, his cardio looked impossible for a heavyweight, and his wrestling turned elite strikers into exhausted survivors. For many fans, Cain Velasquez represented the evolution of the modern heavyweight fighter. He combined world-class wrestling, brutal boxing, endless stamina, and unmatched aggression. When he entered the cage, opponents knew they were about to experience one of the most difficult nights of their careers. But Cain's story is not only about championships and victories, it's also a story of injuries, setbacks, redemption, and controversy. From dominating the UFC heavyweight division to facing serious personal struggles outside the cage, his journey became one of the most emotional stories in MMA history. This is the story of Cain Velasquez. Cain Velasquez was born on July 28, 1982, in California. His father came from Mexico and worked hard to provide for the family, while his mother was born in the United States. Cain grew up understanding discipline, sacrifice, and hard work from an early age. As a teenager, he quickly became obsessed with wrestling. Coaches noticed that he wasn't just talented, he had incredible determination. Even during exhausting training sessions, he continued pushing harder than everyone else. In high school wrestling, Cain became one of the best athletes in Arizona. He won multiple championships and built a reputation for his relentless pace. Opponents often couldn't keep up with his pressure. That same pressure would later become his signature weapon in MMA. After high school, he continued wrestling at Arizona State University, competing against elite athletes at the NCAA level. Wrestling gave Cain the foundation that would later help him dominate in mixed martial arts, but at the time, few people imagined he would become one of the greatest heavyweight fighters ever. Like many wrestlers in the mid-2000s, Cain eventually transitioned into MMA. The sport was rapidly growing, and organizations like the UFC were becoming global sensations. From the moment Cain entered professional MMA, people immediately saw something special. Heavyweights were usually known for explosive power, but poor cardio. Cain was different. He moved like a middleweight, trapped inside a heavyweight body. He could pressure opponents for round after round without slowing down. His combination of wrestling and striking became terrifying. Cain made his UFC debut in 2008 and instantly started destroying opponents. Fight after fight, he overwhelmed fighters with pressure, takedowns, and brutal ground and pound. Fans were shocked by his speed. Heavyweights simply weren't supposed to move like that. Soon, the UFC realized they had a future superstar on their hands. One of the biggest moments early in Cain's career came against Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, a legendary heavyweight and former UFC champion. Nogueira was respected around the world for his toughness and submissions, but Cain completely dominated him. He knocked Nogueira out in the first round, proving that he belonged among the elite heavyweights in the world. That victory earned him a title shot against the heavyweight champion, Brock Lesnar. At the time, Brock Lesnar was one of the biggest stars in combat sports history. He brought massive attention to the UFC and looked almost unstoppable physically. Lesnar was huge, explosive, and incredibly dangerous. Many people believed Cain would struggle against Brock's size and strength. Instead, Cain destroyed him. At UFC 121, Cain Velasquez pressured Brock from the opening seconds. He landed hard punches, stayed aggressive, and never allowed Lesnar to get comfortable. Brock looked overwhelmed by Cain's pace and striking. Eventually, Cain finished him by TKO and became the UFC heavyweight champion. It was a legendary performance. Suddenly, the UFC heavyweight division belonged to Cain Velasquez, but becoming champion was only the beginning. Shortly after winning the title, Cain suffered injuries that kept him out for a long time. Injuries would unfortunately become one of the biggest themes of his career. Knee injuries, shoulder problems, back issues. Cain constantly battled physical setbacks. Many fans believe injuries prevented him from becoming even greater than he already was. When he finally returned, he faced Junior dos Santos on the first ever UFC event broadcast on Fox television in the United States. The pressure was enormous. Millions of viewers were watching, but disaster struck. Junior dos Santos knocked Cain out in just over a minute, taking away his championship in shocking fashion. For the first time in his UFC career, Cain looked human. Some fighters never recover mentally from devastating losses like that. Cain did, and he came back stronger than ever. In the rematch against Junior dos Santos at UFC 155, Cain delivered one of the greatest heavyweight performances ever seen. For 5 rounds, he dominated Junior with pressure, wrestling, boxing, and cardio. He constantly pushed forward, landing combinations and takedowns while exhausting his opponent. By the end of the fight, Junior looked completely broken from the nonstop pressure. Cain regained the UFC heavyweight championship and proved that he was still the best heavyweight in the world. The trilogy fight between Cain and Junior became one of the most brutal heavyweight rivalries in MMA history. In their third fight, Cain once again overwhelmed Junior and finished him by TKO. At his peak, Cain Velasquez looked nearly unbeatable. Many fighters had power, many fighters had wrestling, but almost nobody had Cain's combination of pressure, technique, conditioning, and aggression. Some analysts even called him the greatest heavyweight in UFC history. Long layoffs made consistency almost impossible. Every time he started building momentum, another injury appeared. Still, many fighters and analysts continue to respect him as one of the most dangerous heavyweights alive. His fighting style influenced an entire generation of heavyweights. Modern fighters began focusing more on cardio, movement, and pressure because of what Cain accomplished. Even years later, fighters still study his performances. Outside the cage, Cain was respected for his calm personality and professionalism. Unlike many fighters, he rarely trash-talked opponents. He preferred to let his performances speak for themselves. That made fans respect him even more. He represented hard work, discipline, and toughness. But Cain's life took a dramatic turn after his MMA career slowed down. In 2022, he became involved in a highly controversial legal situation that shocked the combat sports world. News about the case spread rapidly across MMA media and social networks. Many fighters publicly supported Cain, while others debated the seriousness of the situation. The case became one of the most talked about stories in MMA outside the cage. For longtime fans, it was painful seeing a former champion dealing with such serious problems after a legendary career. Even so, Cain's legacy inside MMA remains extremely important. At his best, he redefined what a heavyweight fighter could be. Before Cain, many heavyweights relied mostly on power. Cain showed that a heavyweight could combine elite cardio, nonstop pressure, technical striking, and wrestling into one complete system. His fights against Brock Lesnar and Junior dos Santos are still remembered as some of the greatest heavyweight performances in UFC history. You can still see his influence in modern MMA today. Many younger fighters now train specifically to maintain high pace and pressure for 5 rounds, something Cain made famous in the heavyweight division. For Mexican-American MMA fans, Cain also became a major symbol of representation in combat sports. He proudly embraced his heritage and inspired many young fighters across the United States and Mexico. His entrance wearing the brown pride chest tattoo became iconic in MMA culture. Despite injuries, setbacks, and controversy, Cain Velasquez remains one of the most respected heavyweights the sport has ever seen. When fans discuss the greatest UFC heavyweights of all time, his name is always part of the conversation. Some choose Fedor Emelianenko, others choose Stipe Miocic, some choose John Jones, but many still believe that the most dangerous heavyweight at his absolute peak was Cain Velasquez, because when Cain was healthy, motivated, and in rhythm, he looked almost unstoppable. He didn't just defeat opponents, he drowned them with pressure. And that is why the legend of Cain Velasquez still lives on in MMA history.